And the ad is for J Street, that is the openly Zionist wing. But let's say that that it could be possible that they were going to withdraw from the 2/3 or 20% of what is currently Israel-Palestine is left to the Palestinians. If you include anyway, it's about 22% is left. In '67, it was what 75%. In '48, when they divided the country, it was roughly 50-50. But the Israelis conducted a war and drove the Palestinians out on day one, which brought it down to 2/3, then 75%, etc. Now, if I were to ask every one of you right now, were you for the liberation, the national liberation movement in Kenya against British control, in Rhodesia against British control, in every African country, because they were all colonized by Spain, France, Germany, Italy, and so the entire map was a colonial monstrosity, including the rest of the world. And the position of every progressive liberal, goddammit, was we're against colonialism, British troops, French troops, German troops, out now, except one thing though, Palestine. The Jews were colonized in that country beginning as a tiny minority. Why not apply the same standard that we apply everywhere else in the world, that Israel is a Zionist, racist, colonial, settler state and an outpost for imperialism? That was always the position of the Palestinians until 1973, when they changed it and they said, we're for a democratic, secular Palestine with the right of return. They didn't say state, because state implies the existing capitalist state. So, from our point of view, yes, we are for, and it was a concession by the PLO, because the Israelis dominated the entire country. So a democratic secular Palestine means that Jews and Arabs can live together as equal in a democratic society, the class nature of which is to be determined by them, with the right of all the people who have been dispossessed, the majority of the population, to come back and run their own country. Now what about the South Africans? Did we run around saying in South Africa, black majority rule, or did we say black and white unite and fight against the South African ruling class? Did we look to the apartheid Boer white working class as the liberation force for the blacks? Yeah, how about the Irish? They've been fighting for 700 years. Did we say that they should get together with their Protestant friends who were colonized into the country and made a majority and maintain British colonial rule? Or were we for Irish liberation? In every case, the Marxist movement, socialist movement, and even the national liberation movement were against colonization. They were for the right of the nationally oppressed to self-determination. They were against colonial rule. That's my position. I never recognized the legitimacy of the state of Israel. Neither did my party. What legitimacy do they have? They're a colonial regime.
30 seconds.
So I am for a democratic secular Palestine, and that is only going to take place, as you said, in the context of a class struggle fight in the entire Middle East, and a mobilization of the Palestinian people in solidarity with that fight, and a fight for their right of self-determination. If I could just say one more thing about boycott. You know, the ILWU had a one-day thing to boycott Israeli ship. The Israeli ship wasn't there, so they boycotted another ship, which is not, it wasn't there. But they had a one-day thing. So they unloaded the ship the next day. They didn't have a general strike. The Israeli ship was this was a symbolic gesture. This was a BDS type thing, as Chris said. This wasn't the power of the working class. If they really wanted to make a statement, they closed down the port not for one day, because they always closed down the port. And in the great majority, they have in their contract a provision they don't lose any money for it. Because they have a year, 1 day a year to for negotiations discussion. So the union votes to negotiate that day, so they don't unload the boat. And then they unload it the next day, or the next shift. But whatever the case, it's a terrific thing, and I supported it. But it wasn't a, quote, general strike to counterpose against BDS. Now, the students at Berkeley passed a motion, had a referendum, and then they got the student government to divest all UC Berkeley with 40,000 students and 30,000 faculty from Israel. Right. And that passed the student government, and they put the screws on the student body president. They have a parliamentary system, and he, like the president of the United States, vetoed the bill. And 800 students sat in to override the veto. And the Israelis, they had full-page ads in the Daily Californian, total opposition to the divestment motion. That mobilized and raised the consciousness of the students who organized themselves through the Palestinian group, Students for Justice in Palestine, which has grown all over the country. Yes, they're a propaganda group. Kids are not going to organize a general strike. Neither did they organize general strikes during Vietnam, but they were a powerful social force that awakened the consciousness of the people. There's absolutely no need whatsoever to counterpose what the Longshore did to what the young people did.
That's right.
They're all part of the same movement. To say that the kids are not interested in class struggle as they're petty bourgeois students, and the workers are going to lead the struggle with a one-day thing and then unload the Israeli ship the next day is not serious politics. And neither is a binational state. As Chris said, that just misses a whole national question. What do you mean a binational state? A state where there are two nations in one with equal rights and democratic? That's not my position. I see the Israeli state as a Zionist colonial settler, pro-imperialist state imposed on the Palestinian people. Now you call it a binational worker state. And I say, I'm for a worker state for sure. But the road to the worker state is not on the backs of the oppressed Palestinian people. It's to fight for their freedom without any conditions. And to get the Israeli settlers off their back. And the only way you're going to win socialist consciousness is to support the oppressed nationalities and demonstrate that workers are on the side of the oppressed, like as with blacks in the United States.
Follow that,
I don't
Chris.
know whether I entirely agree with the previous speaker. I'd go as far as saying I believe that socialism should transcend nationality. And basically, we have to get rid of this one nation dominating another nation throughout the planet. It's about time we realize, for instance, in Canada, that we have multinational state here, not just a two-nation state. There are loads of people with different nationalities here, and we can get along together. And it's about time we tried. Thank you.
Just wanted to know, I don't know exactly the history, but what is the legitimacy of the state of Israel? What is that grounded on?
I really appreciate the chance to kind of hear all this lovely verbiage once again. I used to belong to the Peace Center back in the 1960s, and so I've stumbled on your meeting, and by George, I've heard just what kind of inspires my spirit, and I'm really grateful to you folks for still holding up the flame. I didn't realize that there was still such a thing as socialism running around loose. It's very encouraging. And
according to Rob Ford, we're all socialists.
Yeah. So I just want to say thanks for letting me park here for a little while to hear you folks out, and if I can get some more information on how to connect and give a bit of input. I got religion on LSD back in California in the 60s down around Berkeley, and God told me to talk to the Palestinians because nobody knew about the
Thank you, brother. Okay, anybody else for the first time? Last chance for, yes?
Well,
Oh, hi, yes.
I know we're really going into this topic a lot, but I think it is a relevant discussion to get into as the American ruling elite has decided to bring up the, what's the word, like the mirage of the two-state solution once again. Speaking of Malcolm X's birthday, one of the things that I thought was most powerful about what he would point out is that if you're a minority in a society, but you happen to be an oppressed nationality, you happen to also be a majority on the world stage. So if you want to, if you ignore the international situation, then you're going to be in the position of begging. If you relate to the international situation, then you realize that you're in the majority and you will act like a majority. So I think one of the other reasons why I believe, my understanding why the demand was a democratic secular Palestine is I believe it didn't want to leave out the possibility of an Arab federation. And as we're seeing right now, pan-Arabism is one of the most powerful forces on the scene today. I mean, you have the Egyptians saying, okay, we're going to open the Rafah border now. Maybe we'll cancel the treaty with Israel, which would also include the Camp David Accords included this deal where they would sell gas to Israel at extremely low prices. And I just learned that they also have all these other deals where 10% of their textiles will include Israeli goods. And so there's all kinds of potential for Israel to get economically and socially isolated here. And that would be extremely powerful, and it would be far more powerful than a few really small rockets landing in Israel every so often. And that is the social force that is right now motivating the whole scene. And I guess I'm not going to go much more on that, but basically just to throw in the regional and international perspective that Palestinian nationalism doesn't just mean Palestine; it means Arab too, and that in and of itself is clearly a moving force right now.
Thank you, Conley. Okay, so the list is closed, and I have two speakers for the second time around, of which I will give 1 minute each to ask their question, and then we will come back to the panel and give them 6 minutes each for their closing. Doug?
I saw some things in this most recent election that we've had in Canada, and I had the opportunity to speak to about 8 different countries in Africa, groups of students from Namibia and other countries, and South Africa and so on, and they all seem to have close to about 6 or 7 languages each. I was just amazed. And these particular students in a part of South Scarborough, where there'd never been, let's say, an NDP or a bloc or any consciousness whatsoever in the buildings they were in, they ended up almost like an educational force, and just like unbelievable. From where you had 20 to 15 to 5 for NDP, all of a sudden you had 187 for NDP and like 15 and 10 for conservative and liberal. And those changes was the first breakthrough that the NDP's had, and that's here in part of Toronto. And it was where there were some students that were actually here as Bible students, but half of their studies were political science. And they have huge intellectual interests, and they are an elite. They're sons and daughters, mostly daughters, of basically wealthy families.
Wrap up, Howard.
But the intellectual questioning, they asked me for things. I was in only one building that I could manage to get into, and ended up going through 5, 7-story, 11-story, and then the huge buildings. And they wanted to carry on and get it out there because they saw a parallel between the United States with the Democratic and Republican corporate bankrolled parties that ran a smoke and mirrors campaign with polling agencies to find out what you thought and then tell you what you wanted to hear, get your vote, then do what they wanted underneath and throw you a few candies here and there, and then you get your vote again. And they saw the parallel with liberal and conservative in Canada, but that there was a difference. And they thought that was important And they thought that that's what people in Quebec would be doing, and they were right.